Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on field service and delivering the right skills in the right place at the right time, at the right cost, and with the right support. My name is Thomas Ego, and I'm the Content Director at Copperberg, the leading organizer of business platforms for service leaders in Europe, organizing events throughout the year on service management, spare parts, field service, IoT, and pricing excellence. I'm joined today by Bryan Philbin, who is the industry principal field service at Pegasystems. Also with us, we're very glad to have Daniel O'Connor. Daniel is the Vice President Global Product Training and Field Service Development at Rolls Royce Marine. And for your information, a recorded version of this webinar will be made available for all participants, and we'd also love to hear from you today. We will have a live Q&A segment to conclude the webinar, but don't hesitate to submit your questions throughout the presentations in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible. However, if we're unable to answer your question live, we'll try to get back to you with an answer by email. So for those of you just joining us now, again, welcome to the Copperberg webinar on field service and delivering the right skills in the right place at the right time, at the right cost, and with the right support. The agenda for today. First, we'll go to Bryan, who will tell us more about Pega and the unique way they address service and operations challenges and give customers maximum capabilities delivered by the unified platform for speed and agility to tackle constant changes in the business. Then we'll go over to Daniel, who will share Rolls-Royce Marine's approach to digitization of their field service business, how and where to get started to ensure long-term success, how to continuously evolve your systems without relying on a programmer, and finally, lessons learned if they were to start again. And we will then conclude the webinar again with a Q&A segment, so make sure to submit questions for the speakers. So what I will do now is pass over the presentation to Bryan. So Bryan, if you are ready. Bryan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Thomas. You should be seeing my slide deck now.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for the introduction, Thomas. My name is Bryan Philbin. I'm a director at Pegasystems. My area of focus is field service and all of the things that that incorporates. So real quickly, just as a level set, we're going to go through, as Thomas mentioned, some of the field service challenges. I'll kind of give you an idea of who Pega is, very short idea of that. The field service challenges, new approaches to dealing with those challenges. And then, the real meat of this presentation is to hand it off to Danny and let him tell you about Rolls Royce's experience and how they're working to solve this digital transformation challenge for their organization. And as Thomas mentioned, we're going to open up the floor for Q&A, so get your questions in. So who is Pegasystems? Pega is a leading software provider helping our customers with customer engagement and operational excellence. It's a digital transformation platform. So Pega allows you to quickly deploy applications to solve very strategic and long-reaching problems, and then to be able to evolve those applications over time. So either using our standard applications or a platform as the base, and then building solutions that solve your business problems and evolving them quickly as you go through, as new challenges come along, right? So our global 3,000 customers, they rely on Pega for dynamic solutions as well as our out-of-box applications to be able to solve these problems with their organization, mainly around driving repeatability, operational excellence, being able to make the software support the processes that the folks are actually doing, So things around marketing, sales, customer service, and operations, those segments of the business, being able to provide those the people in those organizations with the tools they need to be able to do their job, that doesn't burden them with learning the new software, but allows them to do what they need to do and facilitates that work and the collection of data. So if you think about Pega's customers, Cisco is using Pega on a very revolutionary digital transformation journey that they're going through right now. They have about 30 applications. I think the last number I looked at was 34 applications that they've built. So one of the questions they ask themselves every time is, do we already have a software platform that will allow us to solve this problem before we go looking for a new platform or a new software solution to try and keep the number of disparate software solutions that they've got down? If you've ever mashed the OnStar button in your GM vehicle, the person on the other end of the phone you're talking to is using a Pega system to guide you through whatever that process is. Toyota uses a mobile application built by Pega to manage their quality of their production facilities on the shop floor as they go through their day-to-day production of vehicles. And Ford uses us as a global warranty solution to help address warranty claims, get their customers the warranty service that they need, reimburse their dealerships, etc. And there are dozens and dozens of other customers in the manufacturing segment, which is the segment that I work in, that use Pega to do pretty revolutionary things within their business. So when we start thinking about field and the ability to support your customers and your employees out in the field, you know, there's the question that always comes up, so what's the actual problem that we're trying to face? So if you think about your field organizations and how those workers work, we as people in that industry rely way too much on tribal knowledge. There aren't a whole lot of systematic ways to support figuring out what we need to do, going through the process of getting the right people to the right place at the right time with the right skills to provide that outstanding service. And then once the folks in the field arrive at that location, a lot of times they're relying on tribal knowledge, their knowledge in their head to be able to figure out what to do, how to, you know, what actions to take, how to interact with the customer. You know, retrieving data, as you know, another segment of this is, well, if I don't have tribal knowledge, I've got to go off and figure out where the data is. It's typically very painful to get at the right data. I don't know how many of us have multiple SharePoint servers that we go to, and it's always trying to figure out where the data is, where the documentation is, those instructions. If I need information, where do I go and get it? And if I do go and get it, is it going to be available for me to use offline? So if I go, in the case of Rolls Royce Marine, if I go into the hull of a ship and I don't have coverage, if that data that I need or those instructions that I need are only available when I have an internet connection, I've got a problem if I don't have coverage in the engine room of that ship, right? So getting up-to-date data to and from the field is also pretty sporadic. As I mentioned, there's no such thing as always-on connectivity. So you've got to be able to do your job in the field, have the data at your fingertips while you're doing that work. And it has to work whether you're connected or not. And it needs to be transparent to that user as well. And then, you know, as I mentioned, we all see the carrier coverage maps that show that, you know, they have red everywhere, or blue or green or orange, whatever their color is. But we all know that we run into situations where there is no connectivity. So again, my app has to work. I don't need to manage the connection. I just need to be able to do my job. And your field forces typically represent some of the highest cost to your organization. They have highly specialized skills. They're face-to-face with your customers, you know, so they are the face of your company when they're, you know, the customer calls for service. And it's a very expensive proposition to not provide them with the right tools to do their job. And software is a tool when used correctly. It's a burden when not used correctly. And lastly, the folks out in the field are usually detached completely from the internal support organizations. If you're sitting at your desk in your cube and you have a problem with your keyboard, you call IT, somebody runs to your desk and fix it. If you're out in the field, not so much. You're pretty much on your own. So these are the challenges that we see when people are looking at, how do I revolutionize or transform my field organization and all of the people that support those field workers? How do I get this done? So to do this right, you need a plan, right? So we're going to hear from Danny, and he'll explain to you the plan, the process that Rolls has gone through. But as a standard process for doing this, and this is one of the processes that Danny followed, you need to admit you have a problem. The first step to correcting the problem is admitting that there is a problem. So ask your staff and your customers, what are we doing right? Where could we improve? They are going to provide you with the greatest amount of insight as to where you need to focus your energy and in the priority order that it needs to be focused. Back office and field people have really different needs. If I'm sitting in a cube and I've got 2 monitors and a keyboard and a laptop and a mouse and a cup of coffee and a comfy chair, that's very different than somebody that's working in the hull of a ship or on a scaffolding or going in and out of an oil refining facility, right? So remember that in an attempt to solve all things for all people, you could end up solving no things for no people. So identify the fact that these needs are different and use a pretty restrictive lens when you're starting to look at how broadly you could apply some of this technology and whether the workflows are exactly the same. And then one of the items we're running into lately is technology is this great stuff, right? But you really need to let your core values drive decisions. I recently had a conversation with a prospect where their COO went to some seminar, and the seminar was all about how IVRs will solve the voice response units will solve all of the world's problems. So they implemented a process that forced all of their customers through a very tedious IVR process of press 1 for this, press 2 for that. Unfortunately, they were a high-touch organization who had built a reputation of being very, very customer-focused. That isn't, we've all had this experience. We all try and mash the press 0, right? Because we're tired of going through 37 different menu options. It really diverged from what their core value was, which is that high-touch, very personal customer service. So don't necessarily adopt technology or run towards the technology that seems to be the newest fad if it doesn't support your core values. And then another one that's extremely painful, especially for the folks out in the field, is never let reporting drive the user experience. Too often we get together with customers who say, hey, I have this form and I need to get it down to the person's device and they need to fill out this form. Well, that's not necessarily how the technician or the engineer or the field worker is doing their work. Why not look at the way they do their work and let the data, drive the data they collect to feed the form templates, right? You can always take the data, and we always say don't mobilize the form, mobilize the data, and then let the system build out those reports or those, those outputs, those receipts, etc. And then lastly, focus, focus, focus. So always look at the low-hanging fruit. I have a running joke called Bryan's rule of low-hanging fruit. If you send a 6-year-old out to pick low-hanging fruit, and then you send your 12-year-old out 2 days later, there suddenly is a lot more low-hanging fruit than there was for the 6-year-old. So eventually you got an adult on an orchard ladder at the top of the tree, and there's no fruit left on the tree. So again, talk to your customers and your employees, find out where you can get some really good value, go after those low-hanging fruit items quickly, and then continuously evolve as you go forward. So one of the things that has shifted in the market is the traditional enterprise approach of we're going to build this massive requirements document. We're going to throw it over the wall to our developers. They're going to get locked in a conference room for 6 or 8 months, 9 months, whatever it takes. We're going to slide pizza and energy drink under the door, and eventually they're going to output some massive, big splash type of process. That doesn't necessarily work anymore. Business needs to be more agile. The flip side of that is I could always buy an off-the-shelf application but then I have to change the way my business works to match the software. Or I have to spend an exorbitant amount of money to configure this out-of-box or customize this out-of-box package to meet what my business needs are. Neither one of those provide you with a really agile way of moving forward so that you can be very nimble. And workforce automation applications and solutions, they have to be nimble. Your market is changing, technology is changing, your customer demands are changing, regulatory pressures are changing. You need to be able to adapt to these changes. You need to get something out there quickly that solves the problem. So no longer are we on a 2 or 3 year development life cycle for how we're going to get an application out to our users. It needs to be rapid deployment and continuously evolve as the market and your requirements evolve. And then using constant feedback from the user community, be it your customers using your portal or your customer interaction process, calling into your call center, your employees that are dealing with those customers, as well as the service technicians, the managers, the operations folks that are supporting them. Get that constant feedback, incorporate that feedback into the application, and you'll have a higher user adoption rate, higher success, and happier employees. And the one thing that plays into this over and over again is, in the old days we used to issue a laptop to one of our technicians that went out and worked on cell sites, and they'd have it for 5 years. Well, now we're issuing smartphones, or we're letting people bring your own device to work, BYOD, and those devices are obsolete within months of them purchasing them, and accessories start to drop off the face of the earth 6 months later, and pretty much in a year that smartphone's obsolete and it's been replaced by something else. So you need to be able to adopt a platform or technology or an approach that allows you to adapt to rapidly changing technological requirements as well. And this also applies in the world of IoT. As IoT devices start to come into more and more ubiquity within the organization or within how your customers are using these items, you're going to have peripheral devices that are going to integrate to those IoT devices when you're out in the field connecting to those machines. And that stuff changes pretty rapidly as well. So I guess the gist of all of this is, in the case of evolving your business on a digital transformation path, the great is the enemy of the good, right? You don't want it to be perfect. You want it to be good. Make educated decisions, take calculated risks, and move forward. But then remember, it's always time to revisit, right? Don't be afraid to look at what you've already deployed and then evaluate whether it's working the way you thought it was going to work, whether you're getting the results that you need out of it. If you're not, then go ahead and make changes. Move forward so you're constantly evolving, analyzing, developing, so that it's an evolutionary path that allows you to constantly adapt to business. So when we look at a typical automation roadmap, and this is just a general example, right? Chunk it up in phases. Once you've got the phases laid out, never be afraid to go back and say, hey, I really think number 3 needs to be done before number 2 now that we got number 1 out in the field. So looking at what you want to be able to do is, obviously you want to take cost out of the business. So replacing antiquated, manual, or really poorly designed processes and functions, data systems, etc. Look at focusing on the manual stuff first, because that helps you get a lot of pain out of the business. It also allows your resources to start focusing on higher value tasks. And then over time, add new workflows. Maybe you want electronic signature capture out in the field. These are just examples of things that folks have done as they've evolved the process. Moving through a very straightforward path, leading from less complex to more complex, and being able to add more and more functionality and business benefit of, happier customers, happier employees, better outcomes, more effectiveness for employees. One of the things we look at for field automation, a lot of times customers will say, look, I want my technicians or my engineers to be more efficient. When a technician or engineer hears that, it's more blood out of a turnip, right? How many more jobs can you give me in a day? What you really want to focus on is effectiveness. I may not be able to give my field resource more jobs in a day, but I could focus on giving them the right job to the point of Danny's presentation, right? I want the right person with the right skills, with the right parts to go to the right location on the right day at the right time to perform the right repair, installation, maintenance activity so that we never have to go back again, right? Go backs cost money. So being able to focus on making that technician more effective when they get to that location is just as powerful as giving them one more job a day. If you start eliminating go backs and return repairs, or how many times can you go out there before you have to order more parts, being able to focus on that kind of stuff will support a more efficient business model, and eventually you will get that extra job to your technicians because you've got the right people doing the right work. So when we look at obtaining the greatest value for your efforts, usually it's always focused in the field process around reducing cost, right? These are very expensive resources. This is a very expensive process. Your customers need their equipment up and operating. You want to focus on better uptimes, all of that process, right? So eliminating paper, manual processes, automate tedious and manual tasks. If you've got multiple systems and you're using a swivel chair approach where I go into one system and I type some data, then I copy it and I paste it into some other software system so that I'm able to update, let robotic automation solve that problem so that the users of the systems are doing one thing at one time in one interface, and the technology is supporting these copy and paste or lookup capabilities or any of those kinds of things that make the process more manual. Then when you start to look at the revenue opportunities, maybe it's not just so much about reducing cost. There's a trend in the industry toward moving field service organizations from a pure cost center model to either revenue neutral or even a profit center model. So once you've leaned out your processes, you become more efficient, you're working as a well-oiled machine, are there cross-sell or upsell opportunities? We know your technicians can improve your net promoter score, right? Your technicians and engineers in the field are the face of the company. Given the right tools to be able to do the job right, they can improve your customer satisfaction. So it's definitely an investment worth making. And then are there things that you could focus on that would help the business overall, like improving renewal rates on service contracts or extended service contracts, decreasing churn? If you're in a competitive kind of industry, you don't want your customers voting with their feet and going to your competitors. So by decreasing churn, you've got the ability to keep your most valuable customers because they're happy with what they're getting from you. And then lastly, are there other value-added services that you could perform or provide to your customers that would set the barrier for leaving much higher, right? It helps reduce your churn. If you provide services that your competitors can't, not only can you keep your customers, but you got a great opportunity to steal their customers as well. And then lastly is really taking a serious look at your business and identifying transformational opportunities. Could guided troubleshooting through a web self-service portal help either resolve problems without ever sending a tech, without ever doing a truck roll, or would it help to provide more detail to isolate a problem so that it makes it easier for you to identify the right technician or engineer to go out in the field? So again, we may not be able to prevent the truck roll, but we could certainly provide more data to the technician in the field. When I was in the field, I was a field service technician, worked in field service industry for over 20 years. I would have killed for more information that was actually relevant to what I was doing. Am I the 13th person walking in here to fix this thing, or is this the first time it's ever broken? What has been done in the past? How did we troubleshoot the fact that I need to go in and replace this particular module? How did we get to this point? All I have is a piece of paper that says go replace the controller card. Well, how did somebody determine that? When I get there, is it really the controller card, or is it something else that I need to do? So being able to do some transformational things that make it easier for your business, your technicians, your customers is going to be a really strategic way to get value out of this investment. And then lastly, analyze. Every kid is a straight A student until report cards show up, right? So if you don't measure it it didn't happen. If you're not analyzing what's going on in the field, you're not analyzing how the business is evolving, you're not analyzing how those solutions you put in the field are actually affecting the business, you'll never actually know where to focus your energy, or if you've hit the mark or you've missed it, either slightly or severely. So again, don't be afraid to measure. So that's enough of me and Philosophy 101 on the whole process of what you're up against and how to try and address those challenges. What would be really helpful is to hear somebody that's actually doing this in real life. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Danny, who's going to tell you about how Rolls Royce is tackling their journey on this digital transformation and evolving their field organization.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Brian. Hopefully you can all see my screen now. I'd just like to start by making clear that I was asked to do this presentation by Thomas and Brian, and they made it very clear to me that this is in no way a sales pitch for Pega. So what you're about to hear, I can assure you, is an honest view and a balanced view about our experiences so far. I will give you a brief background on Rolls Royce and what we do, and in particularly what we're doing in the marine part of our business. I'll talk a little bit around our core R&D program, which we call Ship Intelligence, simply because I think there's some quite clear connections to what we're doing around field service management and our systems strategy, which I'll explain and link together as part of the presentation. And then I'll get into specifically what we're doing around field service transformation in marine and what lessons we've learned over the past few months and couple of years actually, and what I would advise and guide others who are about to embark on or are maybe partway through a journey similar to our own. So firstly, who are we? The first point to make is we're not a car manufacturer. That's usually the first question I get. Do Rolls-Royce still make cars, and do you get a Rolls-Royce company car? Unfortunately, the answer is no to the second question. But we do consider ourselves to be a preeminent engineering company, as the slide suggests, focused on world-class power and propulsion products. It's really our strategy to develop power and propulsion capabilities once, and then look at how we can leverage the benefits and the value of those capabilities many times across multiple sectors. And we place particular focus on what we consider to be differentiated mission-critical power systems, which create higher barriers to entry in the markets in which we choose to operate. In terms of which businesses they are, it's fair to say our core competence and primary market is our gas turbine technology within the aerospace industry, in which we provide many different models for both commercial and defense aircrafts and customers. But also within our portfolio, we've got a power systems business, which is a world leader in large reciprocating engines. And we also provide nuclear instrumentation and control equipment for power plants, as well as nuclear submarine systems for the MOD in the UK. But of course, the focus for this presentation is marine, which is the area of the business that I work in and where we've chosen to deploy FSM. So what do we do in marine? Well, we're very proud to state that we're actually the provider of the widest range of products across the entire marine industry. So you'll find Rolls-Royce products on over 25,000 sailing vessels on the ocean today, ranging from aircraft carriers to high-speed ferries, offshore platform support vessels, cruise ships, you name it, which all contain different combinations of Rolls-Royce products, main engines, thrusters, deck winches, cranes, dynamic positioning systems, power management systems, and as the image on the right suggests, gas turbines as well, which is a good example of where we've actually built capability in our aerospace sector and are now leveraging a derivative of that in the naval marine sector. But where we really add value in marine is around integration. So I mentioned that we've got the widest range of products, and of course, as the industry changes and develops, so do the products and so do the vessel systems. And where we differentiate ourselves is in the integration of those products and ensuring that they work in unison together and are optimized to deliver maximum performance and efficiency and effectiveness of the vessels in line with the requirements and the specifications stipulated by our customers, which is something we see as quite an unparalleled capability within the industry, in particularly, as I mentioned, as vessels become more and more advanced. What do we do in marine services? Well, as you will probably guess, we've got a field service operation of about 1,000 service engineers, which are spread all over the world in over 40 different countries, every single region across the world. And really that's all about ensuring we live up to our promise to our customers that we'll be there to support them wherever they need us, in every port, every day, throughout the life of their vessel. We've also got a spares distribution network in place and a 24/7 technical support function that supports both customers and service engineers, and customer training centres in strategic locations such as Norway, Singapore and Brazil. I mentioned I would touch on one of our core R&D programs, Ship Intelligence, and then I'll link that to what we're doing around field services. There's a lot of activity going on in this area, and we want to be industry leading in it, and we think we are at the moment. The core offerings that we have at the moment revolve around what we call energy management solutions and equipment health management solutions. Energy management is all about improving crew awareness of the ship's performance, supporting environmental reporting, and hopefully allowing our customers to reduce their energy usage, fuel consumption and operating costs by more proactively managing their energy consumption and making that visible for them to aid decision making, recognizing that the fuel consumption costs of a vessel typically over its life actually exceed the cost of the vessel itself. So it's quite significant in terms of the savings opportunities to our customers. Secondly, equipment health management solutions. This is something, again, that we have significant experience within in our aerospace sector and are now leveraging those capabilities within marine. And this is all about moving from reactive to proactive, using sensors on board our vessels and on each of our equipment components to capture data, which once processed through our analytical tools, better enable us to anticipate, predict and prevent failures, should I say, and make more proactive interventions that avoid those things and of course reduce life cycle cost, maximize uptime as a result. So that's what we're doing today. We're also making significant steps forward in the area of intelligent awareness systems, which the image in the top right shows. And we've just this month actually announced that we've signed an agreement with Google that will enable us to use Google's cloud machine learning engine to enhance our artificial intelligence system for detecting, identifying and tracking objects at sea. And that is really in support of our longer term vision around the final point, which is remote and autonomous vessels at sea, which is the image that you see second in from the left in terms of our future design. We've got a long-term vision of delivering unmanned commercial vessels into the market by 2020. We feel that it's a question of when and not if, and we want to lead the way there. So the plan is to deliver, as I said, commercial vessels operating in inland waterways by 2020 and then ocean going by 2025. And we've already made some quite significant steps forwards in that area, including the successful demonstration of the world's first remotely operated commercial vessel, a tug vessel, in June this year that we did in partnership with one of our customers, Svitzer, in Copenhagen Harbour. But I'm sure you're wondering, so how does that relate to FSM? And I think this visual is quite an interesting one, which is supposed to highlight how all of this data links together from point of capture through to connecting it to our back office data centers, through to the addition of expert insight and analytics to that, and then back into the customer interface to aid better decision making. And the point really is, we need to understand, going back to Bryan's point around how do we fit into the bigger picture, what contribution can field services make in this area? And what we've done is really recognize that we form an important cog in that wider machine. So that onboard interface that you can see there in the top left, that could quite easily be substituted, or maybe I should say coupled, with mobile devices of our field service engineers. So that's showing sensor information coming from the asset, the vibration, temperature, and so on. But that could just as easily be data that we've captured through our field service engineer that would augment our understanding of what's happening to our products in service, their behavior, and again, better enable us to predict what's likely to happen in the future and optimize our service support. So on the one hand, we have a role to play in adding to that big data, if you like, in terms of data that we capture as service engineers electronically in the field, but also on the reverse, the analytic outputs from our big data platform will be used to inform FSM, to identify and preempt failures and automatically trigger preventative service interventions to enable us to anticipate what's about to happen and hopefully prevent it in most cases. So there's a clear linkage to what we're doing here to the wider strategy around how do we optimize the true through life cycle cost and performance of the entire vessel and all the equipment installed in it. And that's the way in which we're thinking about a program. The philosophy that we've taken is really linking back to what Bryan said around user engagement. I think, in my mind at least, field service engineers in some ways are a little bit neglected in that they're seen as out of sight, out of mind quite often. They spend the vast majority of the time in the field, not in a company office. And in my mind, that should actually be the reverse. We should be putting them at the center of our organization. They are our interface with our customers. They actually spend more time with our customers than any other resource in the entire company. Most people think of CRMs and key account managers and sales guys and girls when we think about customer interface, but actually it's our service engineers that spend most time with our customers. So it's really important that we're continuously looking at their environment, the support mechanisms they have around them, the training and education that they have, and significantly the systems that they're using to most effectively and efficiently execute their job in front of the customer. So that's the core philosophy of the program. The roles around the outside of the jigsaw are the supporting roles, which I won't go into. As Bryan's already touched on, this is really about, quite simply, having a system that enables us to do those things mentioned there on the right. And we believe if we can do that successfully every time, it will directly lead to happier customers and loyalty. I wanted to share this slide to make the point, and now I'm coming on to sort of advice and what we've learned throughout our journey so far. And the point is, when I talk about FSM systems internally, people often respond to me and say, oh, you mean the iPads? Or, oh, you mean the mobile devices? And yes, of course, that's a part of it. But it's really important for you to consider the holistic system and the end-to-end process, in my opinion. If you only consider one part of it, maybe the scheduling tool or the mobile device or the interface within the mobile device, you're going to miss a huge value generation opportunity by looking at how do you optimize that end-to-end process journey from the point at which you have a problem, a customer inquiry or an automated call generation, through to how does that data get captured and recorded within your FSM system. What interfaces does it need to have in terms of your ERP system, maybe your CRM system or your asset management system or whatever else, and how does that flow then work from a data perspective so that you're not duplicating information, right through to confirmation of the order, generation of a work pack for your service engineers or service technicians containing both documentation but also forms, which Bryan touched on earlier. How do you then schedule them, making sure that they've got the right skills and certificates to do the job that you're planning them on, through to the actual intervention, and what data do you need to record as part of that intervention, through to completing the job, closing it out, processing the data and documentation on the back end, and ultimately closing the order, invoicing, and producing the documentation to close out the job in the most efficient and effective way. We believe that from a mobile perspective, we previously captured less than 5% of lots of really useful, valuable data and knowledge that service engineers obtain and come across when they're interacting with our customers and products in the field. So FSM is really important to us in terms of giving us a mechanism to flexibly capture whatever information and data we think could be useful, but also on the reverse, how do we provide service engineers with the right data at the right time so that they're equipped with the tools and information at their fingertips to make the right decisions and potentially add more value to our customers by providing them with information and opportunities for enhancing the performance of their products and their vessel. So to be clear, the scope of our FSM project is not just the mobile piece, it's the end-to-end inquiry through to closing the order. And I think it's really important that you consider that end-to-end process flow. So what we were looking for, in my opinion, and we talked to and looked at lots of different FSM suppliers, I think it's fair to say that the industry has transformed quite significantly over the past 5 years, from lots of niche providers that customize their product to meet customer requirements, through to a highly competitive, quite large industry with lots of big players, which typically have modularized solutions which are, I wouldn't say all highly configurable, but configurable to some degree, which gives new customers greater flexibility and control over their own destiny, if you like, in terms of the actual structuring and configuration of the system. So to some degree, I would say that the capability itself is often, and the interfaces and what it looks like, you will find that it's much of a muchness. Others may disagree with me on that point, but that led us to think, well, if the capabilities are broadly the same, they've all got a scheduling tool, they've all got a mobile interface, they've all got a CRM front end, they can all build some logic in there and automation and rules and so on, then what is it that really differentiates an FSM supplier, and what is it that attracted us to Pega on that point? And for me, it's 4 things. The first is integration capabilities. Don't underestimate this. I think it's one of the, in my opinion, core reasons for systems failures, in that they develop things that may be really effective and look really sexy in themselves, but they've not considered what interfaces and integration requirements they have and how that needs to talk and pull master data from other systems and provide master data and documentation to other systems. So you need a supplier that's got experience and understanding as to how to embed an FSM system in your wider systems architecture. Secondly, configuration. This is probably highest on, or was highest on our agenda in terms of selection. If you don't have a tool that ultimately you're going to be able to control to a large degree yourselves without relying on going back to the supplier every time you need to change a field from a free text to a drop down, or change the workforce slightly, or add a decision-making criteria, or maybe error-proof a step so somebody can't get it wrong at that point. Every time you make changes like that, which I assure you will come up regularly in terms of requests from users, if you have to go back to the supplier, define the scope, get a quotation on what that's going to cost, probably go through various IT and finance processes internally to manage the change request, and then project manage it, do the user acceptance testing once the supplier's provided it. It's going to take months, and it's going to be very costly. So I would say that whilst undoubtedly you're going to be reliant on the supplier to some degree in the setup of the system, it needs to be something that you can easily control and configure and improve yourselves without a heavy reliance on the supplier. The third is cost. I won't say too much about that, but undoubtedly it's a factor that obviously needs to be considered, and one that I think often gets underestimated in terms of its significance, in my opinion, because it's much softer, of course, than a lot of the other things, is customer focus and the level of customer service orientation that the supplier has or presents themselves as having. And frankly, I've seen quite extreme cases of this in our experiences, and this is going to be a partnership. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be a long-term journey, and it's really important that from a relationship perspective, from a trust perspective, and from an alignment of goals perspective, you select someone that truly believes in your vision and genuinely wants to make this a success just as much as you do. So it's really important that you spend time understanding and assessing that, albeit it's a much softer factor which is difficult to put numerical values on. So what have we learned in summary? The first point I'd say is everything that I've shared and presented is just my own opinion and perception. So I would fully recommend doing your own research, find out for yourselves, make your own assessments. Your view may differ from mine. Hopefully my experiences give you some insight, but very much encourage you to go and look for yourselves. Secondly, as Bryan touched on, engage with end users. It's very easy to get sucked into a sort of silo mentality when developing and in the first instance stipulating requirements. But do take the time to work with service technicians, work with other support roles to understand their experience today and what would really add value for them. They know better than anybody how this can work most efficiently and most effectively. So really take time to engage them and get them actually to write their requirements for you. You just bring it together, and because ultimately they're, in my opinion, your customers. Spend time mapping the strategic fit of your FSM system. I've tried to briefly explain how this fits in with our wider ship intelligence program and long-term strategy within Rolls Royce Marine. Understand that, so don't just think about what you need from this. Make sure you're in a position when challenged to understand and explain, well, how does this fit in with the wider corporate goals of your organization? What is your strategy? How is this an enabler for your wider digitalization journey? Next, focus on process definition and integration prerequisites. I think it's a much talked about potential failing that people see new systems as something that's going to solve all of the process problems. It won't if you don't have very clear process definition and understanding of what you want the system to actually do in support of your process steps. So spend time doing that up front before you even think about engaging on a systems development journey would be my advice. And as I mentioned earlier, really spend time considering what this system needs to talk to. Where does it need to pull data from and provide data to? Next, consider continuous improvement. As Bryan said, I fully agree with it. Focus. Use the low-hanging fruit analogy. You don't need to do everything at once. Progression, not perfection, is something that I've reiterated to my team. Very easy to get carried away and excited about where can we go with this and where can we build in extra rules and automation and so on, all that can come, especially if you have an internal center of excellence, as I would call it, and you develop the capability internally to configure and continually improve the system itself. But really boil it back down to what is the minimum viable product. So my advice would be to, by all means, consider what I call the maximum product, and where do you want to get to, but then scale it back and say, where do we start? How do we get something in that's going to move us forward? And then we can continually iterate and improve and progress on a journey to the maximum product. Finally, prioritize stakeholder engagement activities throughout. This relates to my point earlier about getting too internally focused. This will only, however good the system is and however well you've run the project, this will only work if you bring people with you. And it's really important that all of the key stakeholders at all levels of the organization feel a part of this journey, understand why we're doing it, agree with why we need to do it, and feel informed as you go along and involved as to both the requirements, the development, and then the implementation journey, so that they feel like they've got a stake in it as well, and they've been with you throughout. And I can assure you, if you do that, you'll also, from my experience, get much more empathy when you run into roadblocks internally as well. They'll be much less critical because they've understood where you've come from. You've been very open and honest throughout. You've taken the time to bring them with you, and they'll support you throughout the journey as a result. So on that note, I think that brings me to the end of my time. I'd just like to thank everybody for their attention and for the opportunity to share our experiences with you, and invite any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Daniel, for the presentation. And yes, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the control panel. We already have a couple. My first question would be, what role do mobile devices play in the kind of the digital transformation of your field service process? So you did touch upon, that it's not all about the mobile device or the scheduling, but I imagine they do play an important role nonetheless.
Yeah, of course, as I think Bryan explained, it is a key component of the wider systems infrastructure when it comes to field services, for sure. My advice would be to ensure that you're clearly stipulating in your requirements that you need a system that is able to be largely device independent, meaning that, as Bryan touched on, we know that devices change and evolve at a very rapid rate these days. You need to future-proof your system in the sense that you can adapt to that, and the system will be device friendly both now and in the future. Also, I would say that, at least from a Rolls Royce Marine perspective, our service engineers use different devices based on the circumstances. In some cases they'll need to take their laptop with them, in which case they might want to, and it's more efficient for them to fill out a service report, for example, on their laptop. In other cases, it's more sensible for them to take a tablet device, and for certain tasks they might choose to just take a mobile phone in difficult to get to locations, for example, where they're not always able to carry larger devices with them. So you have to be flexible in that regard, and make sure that you can interchange between devices but still fill in the same data capture requirements.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is that if the data coming back from the field needs to be as close to real time as possible, the only device that a person usually carries with them, regardless of what it is their phone. So as Danny mentioned, right, some engineers need to use laptops, some need to use tablets, some are using phones. I was just dealing with a customer yesterday who deployed a solution 3 years ago, and they put it out on iPads, and they're not getting any real-time data back because the tech is carrying a tool bag, a clipboard, a bunch of other stuff with them when they go out, and they're leaving the iPad in the truck. And now they're in a situation where they're looking at, hey, can we push this down to their smartphone? Because they carry their smartphone with them because it fits in their pocket. So that's the only other consideration. And I know screen real estate is an issue because, as people like me get older, our vision doesn't get worse, our arms get shorter. We need more, the font on the screen needs to be larger to be able to see what's on a smartphone. But again, it is a consideration as far as how much real-time data you want back from the field, knowing that everybody carries their phone and they don't always carry their laptop around.
Yeah. Another question, Daniel, is how and where do you track configuration changes or upgrades of the equipment serviced in the field?
Well, I'm not sure whether the question is with regards to configuration of the system itself or configuration of our products or changes to our products that we're making in the field. So I'll try and answer both. Configuration to the system and changes to that is automatically recorded as an out-of-the-box feature with Pega. So it knows when you've changed a field and will store that as part of its history in terms of who did it and when. So you've got full traceability. In terms of documentation
yeah, there is an update to the question, and he did mean systems in the field under service. So not the actual Pega systems, but I guess more your equipments.
Yeah. So I mentioned integration earlier. We integrate the Pega application with our ERP system, meaning that the data that we capture, and I should say our ERP system is a master source of data for our assets. So the information that we capture is connected to the master source of data for our assets. Right now, that gets stored within, or will get stored within the Pega cloud, meaning we don't push it anywhere else, and we're able to do dashboarding and pull reports and analytics and so on that information directly from the Pega application. We are exploring other integration opportunities for use, in other tools, which will take out manual steps of pulling reports and then doing a more manual amalgamation of data for things like reliability analysis, for example. So we are connected to the master source of data in terms of maintaining asset information and making sure that's up to date. But again, we talked about building for change and not trying to do everything all at once and integrate with every system within your organization on day one. We're looking for future improvement opportunities as well.
Yeah. So, well, actually, one question touching upon the transformation, but not from the technology side, but more on the people or staff side. How is training for this system delivered to the engineers, to the actual engineers?
Yeah, good question. We have some experience with previous systems in this as well. I talked about a center of excellence, which we're building of a core small team of super users centrally, which will be dedicated support and development personnel. But beyond that, we're establishing a hierarchy, if you like, of lead users across every site in the world who'll become, if you like, the first line of support for end users. And our intention is to pull together those lead users and give them a 2-week intensive training program, not on configuration of the tool or anything that we do in the sort of background in terms of tool of the setup, but the functionality and use of the tool, such that they can, as lead users, go back to their sites across the world and train up users locally. And then we'll do that in a phased approach, so it'll be month by month, region by region, where we train them up, support them in going back to their local offices, have a period of hypercare to make sure that we've embedded it properly, iron out any issues that we come across, monitor the data to ensure that we're getting compliance, and then move on to the next region.
Yeah. Well, another question, and I guess it's becoming more and more important as we become a more and more digital world. How are the data security processes addressed in the data management platform?
in the data management. Sorry, repeat the question.
How are the data security processes addressed in the data management platform? So you talked about, of course, a lot of data gathering, and as you have this now platform, how is the data security around the platform addressed? Or is this something that is maybe not within your responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it's not something I've been close to, but we have a data security function within Rolls Royce, and we have very clear criteria and a board that it needs to pass prior to endorsing any new systems. So the IT project manager for this has taken it through that board, and it's passed the requirement specification that we've got internally. I'll be honest, I don't know what they are in detail, but we have passed that gate.
And then one question regarding the training of your engineers. Do Rolls-Royce utilize augmented or virtual reality?
Not today for marine, but we are looking at deploying video streaming capability. So our strategy is really to look at how we can use software off the shelf, if you like, to augment the technical support service that we can provide to our service engineers remotely. So rather than just a phone call, you can actually link in via video stream using the mobile devices that they've already got, so it doesn't require additional hardware. You can actually use the mobile phones or iPads to display what they're seeing live in the field, and obviously there's functionality within the tool to then edit, take pictures, zoom in, draw circles around particular objects so that they can be better guided and supported in field, and also record that intervention as well, so it gets logged as part of the service order history as a record of a completed task that's been supported remotely.
Okay, well, we're actually approaching the end, so I'll ask one more question. We do have a few more, but then what I'll do is I'll send them to Bryan and Danny, and perhaps we can arrange to answer them by email later on. But so the last question would be, how did you prioritize what needed to be done first?
That's a good question. By engaging with end users. So, you know, we looked at the end-to-end process, we looked at the data and metrics that we were generating from that process. So what's our cost, quality, delivery, performance indicators at each of those 4 sub-processes that I displayed on screen earlier. If I can flick up to them. And where do we want to be? So what's the gap from where we are now and where we are today? Where's the waste? So we did a value stream analysis, value stream mapping and analysis activity to understand where the value add interventions are, where we're wasting time and money, and how systems specifically could address some of those opportunities for improvement, and then prioritized which of those opportunities would generate most value in terms of cost, quality, delivery, improvement opportunities, and that formed the prioritization of our requirements definition.
Okay, great. Well, Bryan, Daniel, thanks a lot for your time today and for your insights. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar. Again, we'll be sending out the recording either tomorrow or latest on Monday. And if you have any information that you need from Pegasystems, you can visit the website. Same to Rolls Royce. You'll be getting all the information via email. And hope to see you at a future Copperberg webinar or physical event. Thanks a lot, Bryan and Daniel.
Thank you.